And this particular discussion is not the regular discussion on immigration. It's more in around the question of the legal system. And they talk about, all the time they talk about the broken system of immigration, but we should talk about the broken legal system on immigration. That probably could be the thing. I want to thank you, Mr. Malcolm, Rich, and Helen Craig. We met on December to try to put together discussions on this issue. My name is Carlos Arango, by the way. I assume everybody know me, and that's not right. I'm the director of Casaslan, and basically we try to get series of discussions. This is the first one. And basically the discussion is today around the question of how you, how we're gonna change the legal system. That's a tough one, and the other part, I guess, is I mean, we are in the the Senate, probably the Gango Gate gonna discover the immigration bill probably on Tuesday or Wednesday, and obviously everybody see that we don't gonna like it, but what we have to work with whatever they present, and then I mean it has to go to the House and have all these hearings and all these negotiations, and probably I guess gonna be part of the discussion today. So with that, I wanna introduce Omar Lopez. Omar is one of the initiators of the movements in the 70s, in the 60s. Ya está viejo. In the 60s in the area of the North Side and West Town and Humboldt Park, and Omar started with the John Lords back in the 60s, 68, 69, around that time. And so he has a tremendous experience, and today going to be our moderator. So I want to welcome Omar, and Omar going to introduce and moderate the panel. If people need I guess not, but if need a translation or do presentation, I mean, feel free to do it in any language you want, or back and forth, English and Spanglish. So, muchas gracias.
Thank you, Carlos. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I was asked to be the moderator this morning. Carlos already made reference to my youth, so I think they always ask so I can, if you get rowdy, then I'm the one that is going to handle that with you. I don't think that we have a very civil crowd. So I just want to emphasize the importance of this event. Carlos mentioned that probably by Tuesday, the Senate will be introducing the immigration bill. He also mentioned that we probably are not going to like it. But I think that one of the things that we need to start putting attention to is what's in it. It's not just a question of presenting a bill. So I think that the discussion that we're going to have today is going to be very helpful for those of us who are very much involved in the immigration movement today, so that we can also understand the complexity of the legislative process and how the courts, the court system, immigration court system, has so much to do with it, particularly because we believe that the bill that is going to be presented will probably be excluding hundreds of thousands of undocumented workers. So what is going to happen to them? I'm sure that the detention center industry will be very happy with that. And in the process, I think hundreds of thousands of immigrants will have to go through the immigration court system. So I think it behooves us to be knowledgeable of what is happening and what it needs to be done to make sure that all of those immigrants that go through the immigration court system are properly represented and that there is really justice done in the courts. So with that, I'm going to give you a brief bio on our presenters this morning. First, Geoffrey Herring. That's a proper one? The first one, Herring. He's the founder and director of Valparaiso Immigration Clinic, which engages in direct representation and advocacy projects on behalf of immigrants, including asylum seekers and lawful permanent residents of the United States. Prior to joining Valparaiso, Geoffrey was a clinical teaching fellow at Georgetown Law, where he supervised students handling asylum hearings in the immigration court. Geoffrey first practiced immigration law at the Legal Assistance Foundation of Metropolitan Chicago, where he handled a wide range of cases and advocacy work, including direct representation of immigrants in detention, federal appellate work, and affirmative civil rights litigation. While working as a legal aid attorney in Chicago, Geoffrey also taught asylum law as an adjunct professor at the University of Chicago. We also have Gloria Ortiz. Gloria moved to Chicago from Puerto Rico in 2003, and in 2006 obtained a master's degree in sociology. She then taught at an alternative high school in Humboldt Park. In 2008, she joined LAF, the formerly Legal Assistance Foundation, as the immigration paralegal. At LAF, she first spent 2 years working in detention cases specifically and expanded her practice to other type of cases thereafter. Throughout her time in Chicago, she has volunteered with various community projects impacting young people and women in particular. She also participates in community activism around issues including immigrant rights, women's rights, anti-militarization, defense of public schools, prison abolition and support of indigenous movements and other grassroots justice movements in Mexico and Honduras. The other speaker will be Carlos Arango. Carlos is the executive director of Casaslan. Carlos came to Chicago with a wealth of experience from his activities and role in Mexican politics, beginning with the 1968 student movement. He arrived in the United States as a political refugee, and since then, he has been a leading proponent of social justice initiatives around the United States and Mexico. Carlos has played a key role in the immigration movement as far back as the 1980s. He was a leader in the March 10 mobilization in Chicago against H.R. 4437, and today he is active in the efforts to pass immigration legislations, which includes safeguards against criminalizing millions of immigrants. So I'm going to probably ask Jeff to start. You want to come up here? You want to do it from here?
Gracias, Omar. Buenos días. Me alegro mucho estar aquí, y no solamente porque Pilsen tiene la mejor comida in Chicago. It's a pleasure to be here today. I actually live in this neighborhood, so it was surprisingly easy to get here this morning, despite the fact that it's a Saturday morning. As Omar mentioned, we are on the crux of immigration reform, which is a major social change potentially in this country. And although it's certainly not going to be perfect, there are going to be provisions that will likely benefit millions of people in this country. On the other hand, there are a lot of things that Congress is not talking about. And we're going to talk about a couple of those things today. Gloria, after me, will be discussing the United States' massive and massively failed immigration detention system. And I'm going to be talking about the immigration courts. I'm going to start out by giving you guys a little bit of background on what the immigration courts are and what they do. I'm going to move into discussing some problems with the way they work, and I'm going to end up by talking about some potential reforms to improve things. So the immigration courts decide deportation or removal cases. And the judges in these courts are called immigration judges. They're appointed by the Attorney General, and in principle, they serve at the pleasure of the Attorney General, but in reality, these are typically lifetime appointments. There's also a prosecutor in these cases who is employed by the Department of Homeland Security. So we have not just one, but two federal cabinet-level agencies involved in a process. If you want something to go really smoothly, you should make sure there are at least two federal agencies involved. Now, there is also, of course, a non-citizen in every single one of these proceedings who is the subject of the proceedings. Technically, the respondent, as he or she is called, is also entitled to an attorney, but there is an important qualification. The regulations say that the respondent is entitled to an attorney at no expense to the government. So you can have an attorney, but only if you can afford an attorney. So it's, in a way, it's really not much of a right at all. There are a couple of different things that can happen in immigration court cases. One is a good thing. You can go into an immigration court case without any type of status, and you can walk away with an immigration status. You can go in undocumented, and you can come out with asylum. You can come out with a green card. So that's a very good outcome. On the other hand, you can also end up with a deportation order. Those are basically the two outcomes in immigration courts. Now, for those of you who have not had the pleasure of spending many hours in immigration courts, as I have, allow me to briefly sketch what they're like. They're typically located in office buildings, so they don't look like the Daily Center or something. Instead, they are typically squirreled away in the back of some office building. The courtrooms themselves are sort of medium-sized, maybe like a picture of Abraham Lincoln or something in there. A couple of rows of seats in the back for people to sit, and then two tables, just like these tables pretty much in the front, where the non-citizen will sit and his or her attorney, if she has one, and then the government attorney will also sit on a table. And then in the front there will be a table or a bench, if you will, for the judge, who wear a robe just like any other judge. Unlike a lot of courts, immigration judges seem to like to have a lot of office supplies on their bench, so there might be some two-hole punchers, some staplers, some Kleenex up there. There's not any sort of stenographer typing about what happens. Instead, there is a tape recording system. And up until recently, relatively recently, there was a lot of courts were still using like true 1970s, 80s style tape recorders, where how many of you remember or even have tapes around the house anymore? Nobody has tapes. Well, until recently, that was the tape recording system for immigration courts. Now there are digital tape recorders, and the court is supposed to record everything that occurs, although in reality, a lot of what happens is off the record. And there are a lot of exchanges between the immigration judge and the attorneys that are not recorded and typically not translated for the respondent. So if somebody doesn't speak English, she might have absolutely no idea what is happening for large portions of the case. There are 56 immigration courts in the US that are staffed by immigration judges, and there are various numbers of judges. Some of the courts like New York and LA have tons of judges. In Chicago, it's sort of in the middle. We have 9 judges. As I said, these judges will enter deportation orders in some of the cases in front of them. And if that happens, the non-citizen has a right to appeal to a body called the Board of Immigration Appeals, and also can eventually appeal up to the federal circuit courts. So here we have the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the second highest court in the country beneath the Supreme Court. The various federal courts are the second highest level of courts. And in the past decade or so, there have been a lot of federal court decisions really slamming the immigration courts, talking about really serious problems that the judges have made, serious mistakes, things like assuming things about other countries that are just flat out wrong, serious logical errors, all sorts of mistakes of that nature. And part of the problem, no doubt, is that there are some individuals who are immigration judges who simply should not be immigration judges. But I would say, from my more than a decade of experience in these courts, that the vast majority of immigration judges are hardworking, knowledgeable persons who care a lot about their job and have built up a lot of expertise about an area of law that I can tell you firsthand is pretty complicated stuff. And these judges, by and large, know it pretty well. But the real problem here is that these courts are simply overloaded. There's simply too many deportation cases and not enough judges. And every single year, basically, that I have been an attorney, there have been more and more deportation cases filed. In just this past administration, just the past 4 years, the Obama administration deported 1.5 million people, which is more than any other administration in the history of the United States. And before the Obama administration, the Bush administration deported more people than any other prior administration in the United States. So there's an escalation of immigration enforcement without any corresponding increase in the number of judges to hear these cases. And the result is that we have a growing backlog. In 1998, there were about 130,000 pending cases, and in 2013, there were 325,000 pending cases in the immigration courts. In 1998, the average wait time for a final hearing on a case was 324, but by 2013, it has now grown to 553. And I would say that these numbers even are deceptive because they fold in cases involving detained non-citizens, and those cases typically go very quickly in a matter of weeks or months. So the reality is that most people are waiting years for their final hearing. There's, I believe, one judge in the Chicago court who is now setting cases out in 2017 for hearings. So you've got a 4-year wait. Now, some people might not mind, but I would say that this is extremely prejudicial for a lot of folks. For example, asylum seekers who come here, oftentimes forced to flee persecution, they have to leave their country very quickly, and they're not able to bring their family with them when they come to the United States. But as long as they are applying for asylum, they cannot petition for their family members to join them. So their family members have to wait years. These families have to wait years apart from each other, and oftentimes their family members are in grave danger in their country of origin. So these backlogs are really a serious problem. I'm going to talk now about a few other problems with the immigration courts. One is the use of video conferencing. Now, TV is very popular in the United States. Lots of people love TV. But I think that if you would ask people, most people would still say that they don't want the most important decision in their life to be made over the television. But that is what is happening in cases involving video conferencing. And there are a couple ways in which video conferencing is used in immigration court cases. One is, and the major way, is involving detained persons, so persons who are in immigration detention. In those cases, the judge and the attorneys will sit in a room, in a courtroom like in Chicago, and the detainee will sit in some distant detention center in a little room with a camera on him, and he will describe what happened to him and testify over television. And I think there's some real problems with this system. One is that it makes it impossible for the person to really effectively communicate with their attorney. It's difficult to show documents to the individual. It's difficult for people even to understand each other because sometimes there are technical failures. And when you throw an interpreter into the mix, it makes things even more difficult because now you have an interpreter interpreting something that's occurring over television. I think the worst thing, though, about these cases is to force somebody who oftentimes has post-traumatic stress disorder, some sort of mental illness, to testify about the most traumatic things that have happened to them, potentially testifying about having been tortured while they're sitting in a room by themselves that may look, for all intents and purposes, like the very room where they were tortured. And they don't have their attorney with them, they don't have anyone with them. This is the most alienating experience that we can subject people to, but it happens every single day. Another problem involves the inability of people in removal cases to get any kind of information about their case or documents that they need to prove their case. Now, in most other types of court hearings, we have a process called discovery, which is a way that both sides can find out about each other's claims about the case, figure out what's going on. And pretty much everyone agrees, from judges to lawyers to professors, that this is a pretty good system, that it's kind of a good idea to have everyone know what's going on before they go to a court hearing and use a lot of the court's time and a lot of public taxpayers' money. That is not the case for immigration court cases. In immigration court cases, you cannot even get your own file if you are an immigrant in these cases without filing a Freedom of Information Act request. How many of you have ever filed a FOIA request, by the way? Some people. So those of you who've done it know that these are not quick. This is not a quick process. There is supposed to be an expedited system for requesting files in immigration court cases, but even that expedited system is not fast enough for people who are in immigration detention. So if you want to get your file, it's extremely difficult to do that. in immigration court cases. And when you finally do, the reality is that most of what's useful has been redacted. Lately, I have been getting FOIA responses back where there are literally hundreds of pages that are blank except for a little letter and number in the upper right corner, which refers to the statutory citation for the provision of the Freedom of Information Act that the government is asserting as a basis for not turning over the information to me. So things are heavily redacted. Probably the major problem, the biggest problem with these proceedings is just that you don't have a right to an attorney. Many, many years ago, the United States Supreme Court decided in a case called Gideon versus Wainwright that people who are in criminal proceedings have a right to a lawyer because these cases are so complicated and difficult and so much is at stake. People are looking at incarceration for years and years. Well, in immigration court cases, people spend sometimes years in detention while they're fighting these cases. And they're looking at a consequence of deportation to a country that they may not know very well, a country where they will be separated from their family, separated from everything that they hold dear, basically permanent exile. And the consequences just are incredibly severe. And yet, there is no right to an attorney in these proceedings. There is no right to an attorney if you are in detention. There's no right to an attorney if you are mentally ill. There is not even a right to an attorney if you're a child facing these proceedings. So this is a problem that we need to address as well. Now, solutions. It would be easy enough to solve the problem that I said about backlogs. We just need to spend more money on this problem. Some relatively small portion of the massive amount of money that the United States spends every year on Border Patrol agents, building walls, and buying extremely expensive drones could be spent on hiring some immigration judges to hear some of those cases. Video conferencing. Judges should be required in every single case to make a determination on whether video conferencing is appropriate or not. And in cases involving juveniles, mentally ill persons, or persons with an asylum claim, there should be a presumption that video conferencing is not appropriate for the final hearing. Access to records. The lawyer for the government should be required in every single case to turn over certain documents that are key documents that the non-citizen would always need in every single case to handle the case effectively. Access to counsel. Ideally, I would like to see a right to counsel for every single person in one of these proceedings who has a basis for staying in the United States, who has some sort of legitimate claim or defense to assert in their proceeding. That is probably a long shot in today's political environment of the sequester, where there's not even enough money to pay for certain basic things that we take for granted in this country. So there are some, I think, initial steps that could be taken to fix this problem. One would be to guarantee a lawyer for certain vulnerable populations, like children or the mentally ill or detainees. Another thing that Congress could do that would be easy and completely cheap and inexpensive would be to repeal restrictions that right now prevent certain federally funded organizations like the Legal Assistance Foundation of Chicago from representing many undocumented persons. And that would allow them to step up and handle more of these cases. How will these reforms happen? Are these going to be included, you might be wondering, in the immigration reform bills that are in Congress right now? Probably not. From what I've heard from people who are close to this in DC, Congress is not, the Gang of Eight in the Senate and the corresponding House group are not really discussing most of these issues. They may be discussing access to counsel a little bit, but the other issues not so much. Change is going to happen when people stand up and demand it. A few years ago, people thought that immigration reform in general was impossible. And now we are on the crux. We are on the edge of getting major immigration reform in this country. So change happens when people demand it. And all of you should demand that immigrants in this country have something better than second-class courts. Thanks.
Hi. I have to move it? Okay. All right. So disclosure or disclaimer, English is my second language, so I may not be as eloquent or quick as Jeff was here, and I may be reading a lot of it because it's just easier for me to communicate in that way. I prepare my remarks, a lot of it. And what I'm planning to do is to talk about detention conditions, which in general are really bad. And a lot of you probably have heard a lot of the reports, articles. New York Times has worked on this, Detention Watch Network, Human Rights Watch. But what I'm going to try to do is talk about their data, and I'll be quoting a lot of the data that Detention Watch Network has, National Immigrant Justice Center, different organizations that have resources to do like larger level research, but then I can input my experience of the 2 years that I worked closely with detention cases or people in the detention system. And although I'm not doing as much detention related work now, we still come in contact with people requesting our services or trying to get our services. And sometimes we're able to help in a limited basis because, as Jeff was saying, it's not only that there are restrictions for the organization that I work for in the kind of cases we can help, but we also lost the staff position that used to be dedicated only to detention work. After Jeff left the organization, the position wasn't replaced. But we do have, contact with National Immigrant Justice Center, and we try to stay in touch to see what's going on around detention issues. All right. So as another thing that I would like to mention is that because the organization I work for, formerly Legal Assistance Foundation, LAF now, I can't really provide reform advice or any policy. We can't comment on policy, but what I'm gonna try to do is talk about what people out there are saying and kind of inform or provide that information and just give you my input too about the experiences I've seen, but we can't really comment on policy recommendations. So, but as Omar had said, I also worked outside LAF, so if in any moment I feel I can bring something from that aspect, I will be probably speaking from my personal experience because I have worked with a large amount of community activism in Chicago. So that's the part, that's what I like to mention it because I work in the nonprofit system, but I also do a lot of work outside the nonprofit system. So first I want to talk about the increased amount of detention and a little bit of how this came to be, right? So in the 1990s, United States made a monumental shift in immigration policy using detention as primary means of enforcement. In 1996, the United States enacted legislation that dramatically expanded the use of detention. And this information that I'm going to be talking about right now mostly comes from Detention Watch Network. The expansion of mandatory detention was introduced, and I have to say that I've seen how difficult it is to operate under that mandatory detention standard because many cases the person may have relief for their case, may be able to apply to stay in the United States, but because they have to be mandatorily detained, they really don't want to do their cases because specifically we had a case where a person who had come in a refugee status was in detention and he was being re-traumatized by the detention that he was being placed right now. He had been in a detention camp in his original country, so now he was being re-traumatized and he just could not. He had a way to stay in the United States legally. He could apply for relief, but he just couldn't do it. So he decided to take a deportation and just leave as quickly as he could from the detention center. This has meant also this movement that the Department of Homeland Security policies and priorities favor detention. And that data from the National Immigrant Forum relates that the number of daily detention beds has nearly doubled over the past 8 years, from 18,000 in 2004 to the current capacity of 34,000. These numbers are from 2010. From 2001 to 2010, the total number of immigrants who pass through ICE detention per year has also nearly doubled, from 200,000 approximately individuals in 2001 to almost 392,000 individuals in 2010. And you can find this information in one of the reports they have in the website. The average daily population of detained immigrants has also grown approximately from 5,000 in 1994 to 19,000 in 2001 to over 33,000 by the end of 2010. So here we see, of course, the increased amount of detention and the shift to detaining people as opposed of having them do their cases while they're out in their community and looking for resources. Although the Department of Homeland Security owns and operates its own detention centers, it also buys beds and space from 312 county and city prisons nationwide, and they hold the majority of those detainee populations. So over 67% of the people who are detained in immigration detention are in one of these categories of the county or privately operated institution or facility, as they like to call it. So this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and many private corporations and counties profit from it. Another thing that a lot of the reports talk about is about just the geographical and physical aspect of detention centers. They're usually isolated, far away from cities. Like in Chicago, all the detention centers are like at least I would say 2 hours away from Chicago, and some of them are like 7 hours away. In small communities that may not have the resources to really support this population, but they're also kind of invisible and unmarked. You could drive by a detention center and not really notice that that's what's in there. And I've experienced that when we've gone to detention centers in Kenosha or McHenry County Jail. They don't really stand out as like you could see what's going on in there. So what it does is that a lot of people are in the community are unaware of like the high number of immigrants that are detained across across the nation and in their communities. So immigration detention facilities look, feel, and operate like jails. So we have similar human rights abuses as those we see in jails, such as the lack of access to proper nutrition and exercise, medical care, bathrooms, legal and educational materials, phones, and visitations. These are exacerbated in cases where immigration detainees are held for long periods of time in facilities designed for short-term detention. Reports of physical and sexual abuse, sleep deprivation, and isolation are common. And so the Human Rights Watch has a report on sexual abuse in detention. National Immigrant Justice Center, I think, came out with a report on isolation in detention, the practice of using isolation while in detention. And then ACLU has a larger report where they document a lot of these abuses, as well as National Immigrant Justice Center also has a report where they document a lot of the lack of access to bathrooms, or like the limited access to bathrooms. So maybe 10 detainees or 20 detainees would use the same toilet in an area where somebody's sleeping. So it's really dehumanizing. Let me see. So many times there's these reports that we're talking about, but many times these abuses that may be going on are unheard of because detainees are moved around the country quickly before they can even report their grievance. And the lack of privacy also when they have visit with, if a detainee is, lucky enough to have a counsel, when they have visit with counsel with their attorney, many times they don't have privacy. So I know that National Immigrant Justice Center reported about a case where a person that was represented by them wasn't able to report about the sexual abuse she had suffered until like 4 months, because every time she had a visit, they didn't have privacy. So, and when they have phone calls, many times they don't have private phone calls either, or confidential phone calls. Okay, so another problem about this, all these abuses is the lack of the obstacles for immigrants to be able to report the abuses, and then sometimes when it's reported, it's the cover-up. And the New York Times had a report an article in January 10 of 2010, where they reported how officials hid truth of immigrant death in jails, and there they talk about how different deaths that had happened in detention have been covered up, be it by the personnel in the jail or the detention center, where they try to amend or change the records of the medical care that the detainee had received. But the only thing is that they were not smart enough, and then they changed the records. They changed the records to say that they had treated him after he had died. The date where they said they had treated him, he was already dead. So that's how ICE found out about it. But the problem after that was that ICE didn't really communicate that to the family, and really sort of like tried to sweep it to the side and not, really address it. The same way with. And this was related to the death of a person in Bergen County Jail in New Jersey. And actually, he took his life, and he took his life after dealing with excruciating pain from a broken knee and not have been given painkillers for the whole time he was asking for them. So he ended up taking his life, and then they tried to cover up by saying, we did give him painkillers, only that they missed their date when they cover up the medical records. Let me see, how am I doing in time? I'm probably bad. Oh, good, okay. All right, so it's a lot to talk about, so sorry, I'm getting a little nervous here, but it's the medical, so we were talking about reporting all these issues, but I would like to then just maybe talk more about the different type of abuses, right? Like the reports on sexual abuse, and what does that look like? So the report on sexual abuse, what the Human Rights Watch 2010 report sort of documents, is a lot of sexual abuse by guards. And when it was reported to authorities, a lot of times the guards were fired, but nothing else was done about it. Also, there's cases where children were sexually abused, and when they report, this was in Texas, they reported they actually were threatened and food was withheld from them in an effort to just, amedrentarnos, I don't know how to say that in English, intimidate them. But the kids actually kept, reporting, and finally somebody investigated. So the other thing about sexual assault is that, so there's this report talks about multiple instances, and the lack of, but they also talk about the lack of, how would you say that? Lack of, not elements, yes.
Evidence.
No, like to prevent it, the lack of measures to prevent it, right? So one of the things is that sometimes detainees are moved from detention center to detention center with, and this happened a lot with females, although there's reports of males being sexually assaulted or abused. And it's just a male guard who moves them from one detention center to another detention center. So one of the things that one of the guards did is that he actually drove to his place, would rape the victim, and then take her to the other detention center. So now ICE has said, well, from 2010 on, we're gonna have 2 guards in the car, but they still say that they can say that one of the guards would be like same sex as the detainee, because that would be discriminating. So they're saying it could be that 2 male guards are gonna transport a female detainee, or the opposite. So Human Rights Watch sees this as a problem. The other thing is that it was only in 2010 that ICE included sexual assault in their sort of like detention standards. So before 2010, they weren't really looking at any language in the detention standards that sort of like talked about reporting or preventing sexual assault. Now, the other problem with the standards is that these are, the last ones I think is from 2010, but really, a lot of detention centers are not like subject to use them. They could use the 2000 detention standards, and even when they use them, it doesn't mean that they have to comply with them, because these are only standards and they're not like policy or law that you could take somebody to court. You can't take them to court to make sure that they enforce them. So it's just like guidelines more than anything. All right. Like I said, solitary confinement has been another of the abuses that has been documented, and more recently is being in light because of a big case with National Immigrant Justice Center, where a detainee was put in solitary confinement for 30 days because he refused to take meals during Ramadan. Also, solitary confinement is used probably like in many jails and prisons. If you complain about anything, you're going to a hole. If you say you're sick, you're going to a hole. One of the cases, I think it was Boone County, the person said that he was depressed and felt isolated, and what did they do? They put him in solitary confinement. We actually had a client during, when we were working together, that was at Boone County, and Boone County is one of the detention centers that works with the court here in Chicago. I guess I should go back and talk about that in a minute. So Boone County has been notoriously criticized for being one of the worst places. And there, the detainee, what he told us is like, if I complain that I'm feeling sick, that I'm having symptoms of, hearing voices, because he was dealing with schizophrenia and other mental health issues, I'm going to the hole, so I don't want to tell him. So that was their measure to deal with that. So the medical care is another one. It's been documented that here in Chicago, I think it was Jefferson County, no, let me see. Tri-County Detention Center didn't give medications to someone who reported that he was HIV positive for over a month. Let me see, I should have done this differently. All right. So let me just tell you about the detention centers in the area, and then we can sort of I can keep talking about all the sort of documented types of abuses that have happened, and also what people are saying about closing these detention centers. So here around the Chicago area, or people who have court in Chicago, we have Tri-County Detention Center, which is in Illinois, in Yulee, Illinois. We have McHenry County Jail. We have Dutch County Detention Center, which is in Wisconsin. And McHenry County is in McHenry County, Illinois. We have Kenosha Detention Center, which is in Wisconsin. Jefferson County Jail, that is in Illinois, it's southern Illinois, and it's a little closer than Tri-County, but it's still far away from Chicago. And then there's Boone County Jail, which is in Kentucky. And all people who have court in Chicago, they could be in any of these detention centers detained. So the ones that have been criticized the most have been Jefferson County Jail, Tri-County Detention Center, and Boone County Jail. Specifically, National Immigrant Justice Center had a report that actually called for closing these 3 detention centers. And it's because it's been the detention centers where more complaints about lack of medical care and lack of access to counsel, no privacy. When people have attorneys, they don't get to talk to them because you schedule calls and you call the day you're supposed to talk to your client, and they don't even know what's going on. This is specifically with Tri-County Detention Center. Boone County Jail, I would say it is sometimes even lucky if you can get a phone call there. My experience was that you would call and try to schedule a phone call with somebody who was in detention there, and it was kind of like a game. You would have to go back and forth, and if you got to talk to your client, it was kind of like a good, it was luck. Then Jefferson County, I think, was being in this list to be closed, specifically because, interestingly, ICE had ICE had classified as a place that was deficient, yet they kept their contract with Boone. I have the information here somewhere. Not Boone, sorry, Jefferson. So Department of Homeland Security said that Jefferson was rated as deficient against the original detention standards in 2007, 2008, and 2009, yet it renewed the contract right in 2009. So even when they themselves have classified a place as not offering or not complying with the standards, they renew their contracts. The same thing happened with Tri-County Detention Center. They were really concerned when they did an inspection, I think it was in 2009. No, in 2008 they inspected, and they were really concerned about the medical care at Tri-County Detention Center, yet they renewed the contract and so they renewed the contract until 2011, and the medical care at Tri-County Detention Center actually was worse, because when they inspected it and said it was bad, there was, I think it was 7 nurses or 7 medical personnel to 195 detainees, and then later they only had 3 nurses for 211 detainees. But apparently, so ICE hasn't come back to revisit that assessment that they previously did. And so we talked about the problem with communication, with the medical care. Another problem is overcrowding. People are sleeping, like I was saying before, close to working toilets. Like their head is actually like beside a working toilet because there's not enough space. And this is at Tri-County Detention Center. All these things that I've tried to not so well put together, I experienced when I was working with people in detention. We had a person who actually talked about all this stuff going on for him at Boone County, lack of communication. They were asked to pay for their medication, and they were asked to pay to see a doctor. So that's another problem there, because if they're detained, how are they going to get money to see a doctor, right? The phone calls are really, really expensive, and the family has to have a landline to receive a phone call. So a lot of the families today just have cell phones, and they have to run and try to get a landline, and also pay for the cost of this privatized communication system that I think is like $1 a minute.
So what county is this?
Which one?
What county is that?
Mainly, a lot of what I'm talking about right now is Tri-County, which is Tri-County is in Uline, Illinois. Uline, Illinois. I don't know. And Jefferson County.
Which is in Kentucky.
I think it's in
Jefferson
Vernon.
is at Mount Vernon, Illinois.
Vernon,
Boone
Illinois,
is
yeah.
Kentucky.
But I would say that they're focusing on those 3 detention centers, but I would say that problems are probably generalized. Like when I talk to people who were at McHenry County Jail, they also reported lack of access to food, like there wasn't enough food, and also very, very cold. We had clients who had disabilities and they weren't cared after. We had a client that had a disability. She only had 1 leg, and when she was in detention, she gained, I think, over 50 pounds, which was really counter for her ability to to walk with just 1 leg. I had a client also who was at Jefferson County and also complained about not having enough food, and people who had been in different detention centers or prisons were really, really complaining about Jefferson and Tri-County and Boone County. I think we have to stop it right there. I just would like to say one thing though, that one of the things that people are saying out there to change this is just let people be in supervision, and so the cost of detaining a person per day is $122, and alternatives to detention include a combination of reporting, like intense supervision, or like what some people would recognize as intense probation maybe, well, with the model from jails, but it's intense supervision, monitoring. That would be $12 a day. So there's all the money that could be used to give people representation, right? These alternatives, according to the Detention Watch Network, still yield 93% of appearance to their hearings. So if they're concern is that people are not going to show up to their hearings. Really, like if 93% of people show up when they're in supervision or any kind of monitoring, then it's all that money that could be used to be representing people in detention, or I mean, in removal cases. I think that's it, and I just wanted to say that very timely, the OA News was talking about, is this OA? Yeah. Talking about the debate of whether detainees or people in removal proceedings deserve to have a lawyer. So it is a little bit out there. People are talking about it. And another group of action that we cannot really we need to pay attention to is like activism that is not like nonprofit driven or other type of activism, because moratorium on deportation campaigns really fought that battle to stop the Crete detention center from being built, and they won. So there's people who are trying to talk about alternatives to detention, but are people who are also fighting to not get more borders. I mean, they call their campaign no borders, no cages, right? So they are in the stand of like, we're not going to allow more detention centers to be built.
Gracias por ambas presentaciones. Creo que la última fue muy interesante. I guess the discussion we should get involved in has to do that we should shift actually the discussion and the debate right now. Okay, everybody is debating about the so-called immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform. And to me, I guess part of the situation is comprehensive immigration reform already is taking place. I mean, they secure the borders, and that the senators went to the border last week, and some of them say that there's no enough security, and they put a condition. To continue to secure the borders. So basically, what they wanna do is continue building the fence, continue building el muro, that we call it el muro de la ignominia, as was called in Mexico. So obviously the policy is it's unfriendly with Mexico, and a month ago we had the visit of Father Alejandro Solalinde, who came from Oaxaca, and he's planning to come again in a caravan through the United States, basically to mention what's going on in Mexico with transmigrants, los transmigrantes. And the thing we're seeing is that, people are suffering incredibly going through Mexico to get into the United States. Besides going into the train called La Bestia, people are subject to everything was described here: sexual abuse, assassinations. 3 years ago, we were in Mexico, and was announced that they find a huge number of transmigrants assassinated in Mexico. So I think we have to see this as international policy. It's not only deal with the United States, but in the way that Mexico and other countries, and particularly Mexico, use as a way to stop, to make the dirty work for the United States in terms of immigration. And I want to, I address it in this way because I think we have to shift the debate in terms of, we are locally discussing, what is going to be the calling day. And yesterday, somebody in the Senate says that the calling day is going to be December 31st of 2011, that people are going to be able to apply for legalization, whatever legalization is going to be. I don't think the Congress or the President are really looking into the fact that changing real immigration policy. The only thing they want to achieve right now is move from family reunification, that was the spirit of immigration law, to move it into the practical labor policy. So they basically want to create a base of guest worker programs so they can bring workers, cheap workers, to do the job that they don't want to do. And I guess that's what they try to put in the books. So obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're not going to be happy with the outcome. Besides, because going to have a lot of restrictions that we expected that happen, and I'm probably going to have to figure out how long people have to wait to get legalized, and the whole core part of citizenship probably could take even to 20 years. We don't know, but this is what they be discussing. What is clear is that the unions and the farm workers industry, they already negotiate, at least in principle, that bring guest worker programs. So they already set aside and negotiate that. And then going to be the problem of labor protections. Labor protection is going to be, very, very, very difficult. And right now, as we live in the United States, we see labor protections are going down. There's no labor protections in this country per se. We need a labor reform that, resolve the issues of salaries. We find out that next week, I think, that workers in the fast industry in Chicago, they're going to have some level of action, direct action, in downtown, because they want to demand increase of wages. I guess the issue that really compile is the whole question of legal process, and the situations they describe. This is really incredible. You don't have a legal system that protect immigrant workers. Don't even, to watch on TV and the way they execute you, because basically what they do, they execute you. Your presence there, but you don't have anything to say about it. And your lawyers in one office and the judges in another office, and you can see it by TV. This is really incredible destruction of due process. I think we have to go back to the basics. In the 70s, we talk about the Conozca sus Derechos campaign, or Know Your Rights campaign. And we have a little card that says you have the right to remain silent. Don't show any information that make immigration know your nationality. Don't say anything until you have a lawyer. And then you have the right to see a lawyer, and then you'll be able to have a suspension of deportation case, or to be a suspension of remotion. Then was 7 years, and now it's 10 years. I think we have to get back to that because the community is so uninformed. And I think what's going on is with the mass media and everything, instead of we get real information, we get really distortion information. I mean, Univision, Telemundo, everybody is every day talking about immigration, but supposedly we should be very informed, but basically we are not. I mean, the question is misinformation, and then you have the other part of this business that you have all these lawyers announcing in TV, promising you the el cielo y las estrellas, and I mean that's not true. See, come to my office and blah blah, and we'll resolve you the world, get legalized, and that kind of publicity that's going on in the mass media. So they're making a big buck on the back of immigrants. But on the other hand, we have that. I mean, I don't know, Legal Assistance Foundation. I don't know if they call it anymore, or whatever they call the Center for Immigrant Rights. And I mean, there's no resources to really provide decent defense for undocumented workers, and because part of their funding are from federal funded, they can do it. Basically, I mean, since the Reagan years, we lost those kind of rights. So I think we have to, I mean, to figure out how we're going to respond after the whatever type of legalization process or immigration reform we're going to have at the table. We have to respond after that, and the question of detention centers, human rights abuses, the people that going to be deported, or people who are called, because attrition, they're going to deport themselves. Because it's the war on attrition, basically. This is what we are right now. And that, so I guess we have to face that level of discussion. And I mean, human rights organizations already denounced different things. The last thing they denounced was that the people has been detained in detention centers in solitary for I don't know how many hours, many days, and that the report says that create a mental problem, depression, and other situations. Basically, was described as a torture, in the report, and that I mean because the only crime people commit is to cross the border without documentation. Obviously, I mean that type of situation has been, I mean, the whole discussion, because of criminalization. So the whole debate has been the criminalization. So the immigration reform is discussed on the basis of that we are criminals. We look criminals. I mean, since 187 in California, and age 4437 in the United States, in the entire United States, where and then we have the Arizona law and the Utah and other places. Basically, even though the Supreme Court already decided that are not in compliance with the Constitution of the United States, but they keep some segments of these laws, probably because the federal government didn't present the case correctly. Even Supreme Court Sotomayor voted in favor to maintain some of the provisions in the Arizona law. Obviously, we get in the situation that we have to reframe the issue on immigration as a human, civil rights issue, And I guess immigration is no longer a mere a question of I mean, who stays, who goes, but basically it's a question that it's a main discussion on civil rights in this country, and that's what has to be directed. This is our position, at least. I mean, that we see all the debate. We see that, I mean, a lot of organizations already compromise because they get the money at the end of the day. They get millions of dollars to do whatever they do after they basically. They get the money to help people, but they don't really care about the fundamental question in this country, that's civil and human rights, and that I guess is in the direction we have to redirect the movement. So since we are here with this organization that Malcolm directs, I think it's important because it's another look, and we're going to have to find out how be providing these the services, the assistance, how we're going to have the educational activities in the community, so people can be aware of the rights and how we're going to prevent that. I mean that immigration abuses. To finish, I think the whole issue of detention centers as an issue that and Omar remarked at the beginning of the presentation. That's a huge business, and it's a private business. They will be very happy to continue doing these detentions, and the question is that the conditions in Illinois, and we get in my office I receive at least 2 or 3 visits during the week, at least, where people say my family is detained, or my husband or my daughter or my son are detained in these detention centers, and that even that is difficult to figure out how to contact them, and even though they have the right to have access to their own consulate, and sometimes we work with the consulate and tries to get contact, but at the same time, at the end of the day, the problem is that the consulate doesn't provide the legal assistance, so they give a list of lawyers, and lawyers cut the arm and the leg, and we go back to the same situation, that we can't free the people, and if I mean the whole system, we can really change it and go in the direction Malcolm says. Malcolm teach me that. He taught me that the legal system, the judges has the authority, has the discretion to free people, even with a bond, and there's no need to maintain people in jails when it's a case of family unity, when they have husbands, when they have daughters, and when they fathers, and they shouldn't put these huge amounts of bonds in their cases. They should be free by their own recognition, especially in this discussion on immigration reform. I mean, we're discussing how people are going to legalize. So the best argument says, well, I mean, we need a moratorium on deportations. I mean, that's exactly, and that the thing we need to do. We have to have a moratorium on deportations, so we should fight in that direction. And that so we invite you to attend May Day, and May Day make the point that the regardless of what happening, we need right now to call the president to make a moratorium on deportations, even though he doesn't listen, because he doesn't listen. We have to gritarle en su cara que I mean, every day they put a family, they break families, or they put the people, they break families, they destroy futures, they destroy dreams, and he continued, like nothing. So I guess May Day could be a good day to ask for that. Muchas gracias.
Okay, we're going to take time now for some questions and answers, and I'm going to be taking the microphone around so we can record it on camera.
Bueno, más que una pregunta, yo creo que es algo como una aportación, ¿no? Mi nombre es Bernardino Echeverría, ¿verdad? Yo toda mi vida me he dedicado a luchar por los derechos de los trabajadores. Inclusive más en la cuestión de inmigración, ¿no? Felicitar a los compañeros que vinieron hablando sobre la cuestión de las cárceles, ¿no? De detención de los trabajadores indocumentados. Primero que nada, yo quisiera felicitar al pueblo inmigrante, ¿no? Porque a través de todos estos años, con todos estos ataques, no ha podido ser realmente vencido, ¿no? O sea, de 10 años para acá, pues yo creo que nos han deportado más de 3 o 4 millones de indocumentados, ¿no? Han sufrido vejaciones, han sufrido toda clase de represión, ¿no? Yo diría que las cárceles del ICE, ¿no? De detención, yo los compararía con la prisión de Guantánamo, ¿no? Yo creo que a lo mejor la prisión de Guantánamo todavía es mucho más agradable que las prisiones del Departamento de Inmigración, ¿no? En Estados Unidos, ¿no? Porque básicamente a los indocumentados se les forza, ¿no? a que firmen su salida voluntaria y se vayan, ¿verdad? Porque duran mucho tiempo encerrados, por muchos de ellos, ¿no? Yo creo que del 100%, un 75, un 80% no deberían de haber estado ahí, ¿no? Y fueron deportados injustamente, ¿no? Muchas de estas familias han sido obligadas a eso, y es por ello que nos encontramos en el problema de que se están regresando a reunificarse con sus familias, ¿no? Viniéndose por el desierto, muchos de ellos muriendo, ¿verdad? Entonces yo digo, esta reforma migratoria ojalá que sea realmente justa, ¿no? Porque ¿cómo se le va a hacer para reunificar realmente las familias, ¿no? Si 3 o 4 millones de personas indocumentadas ya fueron divididas, ¿no? Y ¿cómo le van a hacer esas familias para reunificarse, ¿no? Porque van a poner toda una serie de restricciones, ¿no? Para que esas personas ya quedaron marcadas, ¿no? Como criminales, ¿no? Entonces, muchos de ellos ya no van a poder regresar, unificarse realmente con sus familias, ¿no? Entonces, yo quería mencionar esto porque todavía no conocemos todavía las condiciones en que va a presentarse esta reforma migratoria. Muchas de esas cosas tenemos los comisionados que están diseñando esta reforma, muchos de ellos realmente no conocen en la vida real, ¿verdad? Las condiciones de los inmigrantes, ¿no? Son muchas cosas, ¿no?, de las que podríamos hablar, ¿no? Por ejemplo, nosotros no somos los culpables de que hayamos venido a buscar trabajo a este país, ¿verdad? El mismo gobierno creó las condiciones para que se llenara de inmigrantes aquí y luego después ya no pudieran como tener control real de esto, ¿no? Entonces, nosotros yo no sé, ¿verdad?, por qué dicen que tenemos que pagar algo que nosotros no creamos, ¿no? O sea, nosotros solamente venimos a buscar trabajo, a mantener a nuestras familias, ¿verdad? Y ahora, después de todos estos golpes que se nos han dado, nos van a dar una reforma migratoria en que vamos a tener que pagar costos que realmente no deberíamos de pagar. Ese es mi punto de reflexión, ¿verdad? Y como digo, ¿no? Yo compararía esas prisiones, yo creo que está mejor la prisión de Guantánamo que las prisiones en las que están encerrando a nuestra gente, ¿no? Gracias.
I'm going to try to summarize Bernardino's. Déjame traducir un poquito esto. Summarizing Bernardino's comments, he wanted to thank the speakers for having spoken about the detention centers and the court systems. He congratulates the immigrant community because in spite of all of the repression, it continues to fight. He mentioned that he sees the ICE detention centers similar to Guantanamo, and that type of conditions have forced so many immigrants to sign to leave this country voluntarily, and thus separating their families. He says that it's probably why a lot of them are trying to come back and reunite with their families, and they're dying in the desert in their attempts to come back and be with their families. He felt that the people who are right now involved in the drafting of immigration reform are people who neither know or understand the type of reality that immigrants have to go through. He says that after all, the government was the one that created the conditions that made immigrants come here. He sees no reason why immigrants have to pay now a price, to become documented, when all that the immigrants have done is try to come and be able to support a family. He felt that he wanted to just reflect on that point, and again mentioned the fact that he feels that ICE detention centers are probably worse than Guantánamo. Antonia?
Sí, yo nada más quería, mi nombre es Antonia, y nada más quería yo hacer una pregunta de que si hay alguna manera de que hubiera algún lugar donde las personas que vienen a pedir ayuda acerca de familiares que tengan detenidos en las cárceles, donde puedan ir y tener ayuda, no sé, especial, que la gente sepa.
Entonces, hay un centro que lo está haciendo más ahora, que es el Heartland Alliance, el National Immigrant Justice Center, y yo traje aquí unos listas para que puedan ver después. Mi organización, que es esa que se llama Asistencia Legal, LAF, tuvo antes más recursos para hacer eso. Entonces, parte de lo que estábamos hablando es la falta de recursos que hay para atender estos reclamos y estas necesidades. Solamente ahora mismo casi todo lo está atendiendo esa otra organización de Heartland Alliance. Ahí está el número aquí, y ellos con poca gente son capaces de hacer bastante, que se les felicita. Nosotros todavía podemos atender reclamos y tratar de hacer algo. Ya no tenemos tanto recurso, porque antes estaba el abogado con nosotros haciendo eso nada más casi. Estábamos dedicándonos nada más a casos de detenidos, y él y yo, los dos. Y él se tuvo que ir, pero no reemplazaron. O sea, si él se iba, podían poner a otra persona, pero no pudieron reemplazar por dinero a otra persona. Pero ahí vemos que todo el dinero que se está gastando en detener a las personas lo podrían usar en asistencia legal, pero pues la prioridad ahora mismo es esta cuestión de la privatización y usando el dinero para las prisiones, ¿verdad? Entonces, hay unos números y se los podemos dar, y los recursos están limitados, pero sí uno trata de siempre buscar la manera de hacer algún tipo de referido, o sea, si hay un caso de abuso de derechos humanos, se va a tratar de entrevistar a la persona. Con los recursos son limitados, pero sí está la organización donde trabajo y la otra del Heartland Alliance, que le puedo dar los números, y ahí es más o menos. También está lo que hizo ICE ahora, es que también pueden localizar a sus familiares en línea con el ICE Locator, Y también está no sé cómo está funcionando la línea de la familia, ayuda a la familia de ICRR, esa que ellos tienen una línea. También hay una línea de ayuda a las familias con personas en procesos de deportación que lo tiene una organización y se supone que siempre tengan voluntarios ahí. Entonces le podemos dar esos números y la realidad es que hay algunos recursos, pero sí están limitados. Sí debería haber mucho más porque hay mucha necesidad.
Gracias. Mi nombre es Deyanira. Probablemente esta cuestión ya se trató ahorita en la exposición en inglés, pero ahorita me gustaría saberlo en español. ¿Es factible realmente que en el caso de que un juez le conceda a una persona la salida voluntaria, que pueda regresar fácilmente a los Estados Unidos o realmente no sucede?
Depende en los hechos de cada caso, porque no puedo decir una respuesta general porque depende en la historia migratoria de la persona. A veces sí, si hay por ejemplo, una esposa o hijo en los Estados Unidos quien puede hacer una petición, sí, pero a veces hay varios problemas, no sé cómo se dice, prohibiciones a regresar a los Estados Unidos. Por ejemplo, si una persona ha gastado más de un año o más de 180 días en los Estados Unidos sin estado legal, no se puede regresar sin un permiso especial.
Otra cosa que yo añadiría es que muchas veces hay que tener cuidado con firmar una deportación como estipulada, right? Porque a veces las personas bueno, usted mencionó de ver al juez, entonces ahí sí probablemente son salidas voluntarias, pero a veces algunas personas dicen, pues yo me voy salida voluntaria y a lo mejor alguien me pide y yo regreso, pero en realidad están firmando una deportación porque lo hacen con un oficial y no con un juez. Entonces eso nada más porque hay esa confusión a veces.
Perdone, en el caso de que le haya tocado a un joven que por una falta de tránsito haya ido a localizar a su casa y lo hayan deportado, cuando está en la edad en que puede él calificar para los que llegaron de determinado tiempo acá y todavía son menores de 30 años, 30. ¿Qué es su situación? ¿No hay alguna solución, no?
Lo deportaron ya. Ya está fuera del país.
¿Ya lo sacaron?
Que calificaba para acción diferida.
Ahora no, pero hay un programa que se llama la acción diferida, Deferred Action, para las personas en los Estados Unidos en este momento, o si habían estado en los Estados Unidos el año pasado en una fecha particular en junio del año pasado. Entonces, si una persona ya se ha deportado, no hay una solución en este momentito, pero a veces hay otras opciones y es necesario hablar con un abogado de inmigración para entender si hay otras opciones.
It's good to make the connection between human rights at Guantanamo and what's happening to Mexican people who are working in the United States. The United States has used Mexican labor because it's cheaper for hundreds of years since they took San Antonio and the Alamo.
I really don't have a question. I just like to make a comment that the privatization of the federal detention centers is making enormous profits for the private prison corporations such as Corporation CCA and others. And this is something that is not being addressed in any of the discussions. There's an excellent paper that was written by Jesse Diaz Jr., a professor at University of California in Riverside, California, called The Immigration Industrial Complex, where he documents how the entire federal detention system is just profit-driven. And so this is a crisis not only a constitutional crisis and a crisis of civil liberties, but also a humanitarian crisis. All the deaths that have occurred in detention centers, for instance, are not being addressed in the current proposals that are on the board in Washington. And I think this is something that we as advocates have to be more vocal about. And I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
One of the things that I brought was the list of people who have died in detention and the cause as, investigated. We have to take that with a grain of salt, but and from October 2003 to November 2009, it was 107 people who died in detention. Many of them, and I counted and sort of tried to categorize what was the cause. So 77 people died of illnesses that they maybe had, an illness that they had and they didn't receive proper care when they were in detention. But 15 people committed suicide when they were in detention. And actually one of those cases was here in McHenry County Jail, after the person had asked to see psychological assistance multiple times. And I don't think I can say much because I think that case is under litigation. But then, it ended up where she took her life. There's 8 people who died of AIDS. And as I mentioned before, one of the detainees that was interviewed by National Immigrant Justice Center didn't receive his medications for a whole month. What would that do to somebody's health, right? And 4 of them are categorized as accidents, which I'm not sure what that meant really, electrocuting or drowning, but those are probably suspicious categories to me. A couple of them are still pending, and one was drug intoxication. But so the deaths are, and this is not even up to today. So, and we can see that with the suicide amount, it's a percentage that to me is really concerning too. The illnesses are concerning, but suicide, it means people are having mental health issues probably exacerbated by the detention, and they're not getting any assistance, and they're probably put in solitary confinement or something like that that just creates the trauma. And one of the things that we found out, I think as I was working before in detention, a lot of people who are in detention are actually trauma survivors. They have not only the trauma of being in detention, right, but they have experienced abuse in their past lives and sometimes qualified to stay in the United States because they can apply for a type of visa for experiencing abuse and crime victimization. Yet they sit there for a year while their case is still being decided and leaving more trauma. How is a person like that going to come out of detention? We wonder. You can come out with status, you can be granted status, but in what condition are you going to move forward with your life, right? But the other thing I just wanted to mention quickly is, as he was saying about privatization, one of the things that it was really clear with the Arizona law was that CCA, the Corrections Corporations of America, had lobbying because they wanted that law to pass. They wanted more people to be detainable in the detainable category. So the lobbying industry for these private corporations that are running prisons is a big business for them. It's a huge big business. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is I think it's ACLU says ICE combines heavy-handed approach to enforcement and spends all this money, in detention centers with hands-off approach to daily responsibilities of the detention centers. What happens there, they don't put a lot of money or work into it or nothing. So just wanted to add those couple of points too.
Thank you. Started with CCA, because there was a conference at Northwestern Law School last year about CCA. The implications of the kind of incarceration that they're making for Mexicans, Black people, Negroes, it's not just you people, it's a lot of people. And I think it was significant, your point, sir, about the involvement of President Bill Clinton 20 years ago. And demolishing public housing and just spreading all this racism all over the place.
That's combined also with the sort of like the quotas. That's the other problem, right? ICE has like detention quotas. Like they buy 34,000 beds, and so they're looking for people to fill those beds, right? And that's like all this system is working together.
Más bien que una pregunta sería más bien estaría bueno algo así como formar una comisión, o sea, proponer que se formara una comisión, porque yo recuerdo en los 80s cuando hubo unas deportaciones aquí en Chicago, se formó una comisión que después desapareció, ¿no? Pero en esa ocasión había se vinieron las deportaciones masivas aquí en la ciudad, pusieron un centro de detención cerca del aeropuerto para estar que la gente firmara la salida voluntaria e inmediatamente meternos en el avión y sacarlos, ¿verdad? Yo creo que para esta cuestión, yo creo que una comisión que se formara, una comisión civil, ¿no? Una comisión formada por la iglesia, las uniones, la comunidad, ¿verdad? Que pudiera esa comisión exigir que se le permitiera entrar a estas prisiones para ver que realmente se esté respetando los derechos humanos de estas personas, ¿verdad? Yo creo que eso sería algo bueno, ¿no? Digo, a lo mejor ayudaría un poco, ¿no? En el sentido de que se evitara que se les violara sus derechos, ¿no? ¿Verdad? Y se les pudiera dar asesoría jurídica, ¿no?
La idea.
Do you have a comment on the commission?
¿Cómo se dice? Es una buena idea, sí. Hay la Comisión de Inter-American Human Rights.
Derechos
no sé
humanos
cómo se
interamericanos.
dice. Sí, ellos han estudiado el asunto de detención hace como 3 años más o menos, y ellos han hecho un reporte muy crítica de el sistema de detención en los Estados Unidos. Pero quizá es el tiempo para otra comisión.
Dos cosas con eso. Yo creo que sí, que no podemos dejar a las personas que están en las prisiones, en detenciones, donde sea, no los podemos dejar solos, porque eso es lo que el sistema más o menos quiere, ¿verdad? Que estén aislados. Y es bueno que haya presencia, porque mientras más presencia de cuerpos ahí hay, el poder, los agentes que están en el poder y dirigiendo ven que hay gente viniendo y checando y averiguando cómo está la cosa. Entonces hay que romper ese aislamiento que el mismo sistema quiere, pero a la misma vez también es como, hay que preguntarse si la detención puede ser en algún momento humanizante de cualquier manera, ¿verdad? Como estuve una vez en una mesa donde decían, bueno, pues hay que pelear por mejores centros de detenciones, ¿verdad? Y sí se formó una coalición, no me acuerdo en qué estado fue. Entonces peleaban por un mejor centro de detención, mejores condiciones, vamos. ¿Qué pasó? Que construyeron algo muy high-tech, muy bonito, y empezaron a detener a más personas. Entonces, la cuestión es que hay que tener cuidado que cuando estemos tal vez expresando nuestros objetivos, sí no podemos dejar a las personas que están ahí hoy día solos ni solas, porque hay que estar pendiente y presente y batallando, pero a la misma vez también hay que un poquito tener cuidado cómo enfocamos o cómo cómo ponemos el argumento, porque a veces pues entonces piensan que pueden crear una detención más humana, que puede ser una pregunta si eso es posible o no.
Yo sé que empezamos sobre ese punto.
Sí, sobre ese punto. Que la cuestión o sea, hay el debate, ¿no? que ella lo plantea muy bien, porque mucha gente dijo, bueno, pues hay que crear mejores centros de detención, y el que están prometiendo en Joliet, pues va a ser, hasta vas a poder ir al recreo, no va a ser como Guantánamo, sino vas a poder ir al recreo y jugar ajedrez y hacer ejercicio y todo eso, ¿no? Eso es lo que están proponiendo. Pero pues yo creo que la polémica para nosotros no es si apoyamos centros de detención, sino la polémica para nosotros es cómo paramos la política de represión en contra de la gente, o sea, cómo paramos las deportaciones, cómo paramos las detenciones, las redadas. Actualmente, igual, como decía la señora, llegan diariamente personas a la oficina diciendo, pues, detuvieron a mi hijo, porque sospechan que está ligado a alguna pandilla, o por la sospecha de, o sea, ni siquiera, o fueron a buscar a otro muchacho y encontraron a toda la familia y se la llevaron. Entonces el problema es que inmigración no tiene ninguna restricción en llevarse a la gente libremente. O sea, con una orden de cateo se pueden llevar a personas que no andaban buscando. O sea, traían la lista, traían nomás a Carlos Pérez, pero pues desde ahí ya se llevaron a todos los Carlos que encontraron, se los llevaron, porque no encontraron a Carlos Pérez. Entonces, yo creo que lo que debemos enfocar es en cómo frenar esta política represiva en contra de la comunidad, que es una pelea muy vieja, o sea, realmente no es una pelea nueva, pero yo creo que dentro de la campaña para parar las deportaciones ese es el ángulo principal que deberíamos ejercitar en este momento. La moratoria. Han habido esta semana, en estas semanas, un montón de expresiones y manifestaciones. Han llevado niños a protestar a la casa de Obama, han ido a las oficinas de Darwin a llevar más niños. O sea, ahora la cuestión ha sido llevar niños para decir que están separando a las familias. Yo no sé si es la mejor idea. A veces no me gusta porque como que pasó lo mismo que con Elvira Arellano, que se exacerbó y se exageró el tema de Saúl. O sea, Saúl de pronto, él es el que va a tener que pagar al fin y al cabo las consecuencias de cómo se le utilizó a su persona, porque lo ponían ahí como escudo. Reflexionando esas cosas en el tiempo, no creo que es la mejor perspectiva. Creo que lo que debiéramos hacer es realmente ir a cuerpos internacionales más fuertes como Naciones Unidas, o sea, hacer oír esta voz en Naciones Unidas, en la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos, o sea, hacer escuchar esto en otros niveles. Aquí no nos van a hacer caso. Aquí ni siquiera este país ha querido suscribir la ordenanza esta o ley de los derechos humanos y los derechos de los migrantes y sus familias. Muchos países son signatarios de esa convención Internacional por los Derechos Humanos y por los derechos de los migrantes y sus familias. Y esa convención, Estados Unidos nunca ni siquiera ha suscrito esa convención. Yo creo que aquí lo que tenemos que hacer es mucho trabajo internacional de exponer, porque aquí mismo pues es de autoconsumo, y la cuestión es cómo podemos hacer oír esta voz en niveles internacionales. Yo creo que todos estos reportes que la compañera mencionó de American Watch, la SCIU, todo esto, realmente no deberíamos compilar y producir un reporte, pero no solo el reporte, sino con acción, porque podemos tener miles de reportes, pero si no tenemos una acción sobre esos reportes, pues queda en eso, ¿no? En denuncia. Pero la cuestión es cómo damos el siguiente paso. Yo creo que ese es quizás lo que debíamos ir meditando, pensando, qué es lo que tenemos que hacer después de esta pelea. Bueno, otra vez, y como comenzamos, primero quiero darle las gracias a Malcolm y a Helen, por, voy a romper tu micrófono, ok, a Malcolm y a Helen, por ver, pues tenido esta idea. Como les decía, nos reunimos en diciembre y empezamos a hablar de la necesidad de traer los asuntos de detención, derechos constitucionales, procesos en la corte, lo que los jueces tienen como un privilegio, una discreción, de realmente plantearnos este debate de una manera diferente. Entonces, les quiero agradecer a ellos pues hicimos esto en colaboración con Casa Slan y la organización, ¿cuál es el nombre completo, Malcolm? Chicago Appleseed, ok. Ni siquiera lo puedo decir. Y creo que podemos generar otro tipo de foros y discusiones de esta naturaleza. Creo que este fue el primero. Creo que es muy rico lo que se ha hablado aquí. Yo quiero agradecer a los panelistas por su contribución. Realmente el panorama no es muy bonito, sino creo que lo que nos describieron es bastante dramático, pero creo que al mismo tiempo pues tiene que llamar nuestra atención y cómo debemos pues ir construyendo una agenda. Entonces quiero agradecer a Omar por haber moderado este evento y pues ponernos a la disposición de ustedes para organizar otros, quizás a darle más difusión y pues para que más gente pueda venir y ser parte de esta discusión. Este fue el primero, entonces les agradecemos a todos ustedes por haber pasado esta mañana con nosotros aquí meditando sobre estos temas. A CAN TV para que ellos van a tener esto en el canal 20 o en cuál. Bueno, no sé qué canal. Yeah, but the channel 20 or where it can see? 19 or 20. 19 o 21. Ahí se puede ver todo el foro para que se lo den a sus amigos y otros lo puedan ver. Afortunadamente hoy vivimos en un mundo donde podemos tener toda la comunicación vía televisión, Facebook, las redes sociales y utilizarlas. Yo creo que es muy bueno utilizar las redes sociales para difundir estas ideas y estas discusiones. Muchas gracias a todos por haber estado esta mañana aquí. Espero que muy pronto nos volvamos a ver en otro foro. Gracias.